Hi guys, it's Debbie Potts, and I have a longtime friend from podcasting on the show today, Brad Kearns, to talk about a new book he has with Mark Sisson, who I just ran into at Ironman Hawaii. And it's talking about walking. Are we born to run or are we born to walk? So I'm excited to dive into the subject as I took a few months off really focusing on running because Neil, my husband, had a foot plantar injury and we started doing hikes instead and went hiking in Park City in August a few months ago and really fell in love with just hiking. But I wanted to find hills that are steep hills to get good workout in and feel that I was not needing to run. And then as I start to rebuild my running so I can get my muscles stronger, I really find it interesting to listen to previous podcasts we did on running, doing 30 seconds and running shorter intervals as 30 seconds on, walk a few minutes and run. So you're kind of reverse engineering how to run. And we'll talk to Brad to hear his perspective on should we not run at all? Should we just focus on walking? What if I like to run? I know running has been my struggle since I had my adrenal exhaustion. I used to be able to do a half marathon in 1:35, hour 35, and then my PR running marathons in Boston was always my best times, was at 3:12, 3:17 the next year after that. And I don't brag about that. It's just like I can run now maybe a half marathon in 2 hours. It's ridiculous. I cannot get my body to want to run strong and fast. It's mechanical issues. It's my hips are tight and my muscles are not firing the way they're supposed to. So I'm working on this kind of prehab rehab routine. So doing 30 seconds at a time with good form makes sense to me. And then walking. And then I've been doing this hill right out my window here is Del Dios Highlands Preserve, 1 mile to the top. I get almost 1,000 feet elevation of climbing. And then my heart rate can be 120 up to 140. So it's a great workout. I call it the minimal effective dose. I don't need to do 2 hour run. Same with my bike rides. I just do say 45 minutes an hour and I'm good. And hiking, I think is such a good for the mind, good for the soul, as well as the muscles. So as we age, I'm on the show focusing on how to be fit and healthy from the inside out. This is a great way to go, okay, am I doing what I'm doing now for my fitness program that's going to improve myself in the future? What can I do now to make sure I'm not person you see you're driving by these people running, you're like, oh my God, I hope I don't look like that. I see people just hobbling and it's just, I know I look like that some days. You're like, why are we doing this to ourselves? Maybe I'm better off going for a good walk and a bike riding instead and spending more time in the gym doing some functional strength training. So let's hear from Brad about the new book. So I'm just waiting for Brad to come on the show, but just wanted to read a little bit about the book we're going to talk about. The romanced notion that humans are born to run has so-called running boom in the past 50 years. Well, the well-intentioned fitness enthusiast lacing up their cushioned shoes, plodding down roads and trails in pursuit of the runner's high, a trim physique, and a fountain of youth. Unfortunately, Born to Run is a big fat ruse, a marketing gimmick, and gross misappropriation of evolutionary biology insights about our Homo sapiens genetic attributes for endurance. And here's on the show, but I'll have Brad explain it. I can tell he wrote this part of the book. So that just sounds like him. Hold on, let me bring him on. All right, I've got my longtime podcast friend Brad on the show in his signature yellow outfit. Brad, be rad. Are you being rad today?
I'm trying, especially when we get rolling and we already got a little warmed up before we hit record. So we got stuff to deal with, especially aging gracefully and approaching our athletic passions with the correct and health conscious approach, especially with an eye toward how our bodies are going to feel about it decades from now. And I'm reminding of this epic quote that I received from the great Simon Whitfield, Olympic gold
Oh,
medalist,
yeah.
triathlete, Olympic silver medalist, 8 years later, had a great career. And I was interviewing him after his career in retirement and getting the conversation going. I said, "Hey, what's your your fitness regimen like these days now that you're off the circuit and competing at the highest level?" And he says, Brad, today I'm coached by my 80-year-old self.
Yeah.
And when
Love
you
that.
think about the significance of that,
Hmm.
he's trying to honor that person who's looking down from the future saying, no, no,
Hmm.
no, no, we don't want you going breakneck down a mountain pass or overtraining or, taking these unnecessary risks that you're wearing down your bones and joints. And it's a nice message for all of us to think about that we want to honor our future self with our present day behaviors and decisions.
I've been saying that for a while. The last few years is I keep saying recreate your current self now so you can be your best self in the future. So what are you doing today? Put aside the race or event you've got coming up next year, but how are you going to be showing up to life when you're 70 is young to me. I just had a friend turn 70. I'm like, that's nothing now. Let's look at 80, 90, and as you're talking about your mom, I'm seeing my mom this week, and you watch everyone age. It shifts my focus on my workouts at age 53 now, how I can be looking a lot better. My parents, friends, and my family members, like, all right, let's rearrange our priorities here.
Yeah, I'm about to turn 60, Debbie. I'm so excited. I can't wait because I move into a different division of masters track and field. And we'll probably talk about this later, but I'm now obsessed with explosive power, performance, high intensity sprinting rather than my entire lifetime as an endurance athlete. So it's a beautiful, fresh new challenge that I think is more aligned with health than the extreme endurance stuff. But in
Mhm.
the older age groups, there's a whole nother set of parameters and variables that we need to respect and honor. And one of them that I'm going to contend now is that some of this stuff that you see out there that's glorified as the ultimate fitness and athletic achievements, it's young person's game. I think the marathon itself and the Ironman distance and the marathon distance are a game for young people. And if you're over 50, you probably should be slotted into a 70.3 race rather than an Ironman, and you should be running a 13.1 as your ultimate athletic accomplishment in the 50 plus division rather
Mhm.
than towing the starting line with the great Olympic runners who are in their prime. And we're going to get more into that as the theme of our new book that I wrote with Mark Sisson called Born to Walk comes out. But we have to respect the differences in physiology and recovery. And this also reminds me of a spicy quote back to the common refrain on one's birthday when they say, "Hey, I feel great. I just turned 70. Age is just a number. I just turned 60, but age is just a number." And I heard this on a podcast or something where the person said, "It's not just a freaking number. And if you believe that it's just a number, you better get your butt in gear and start looking in the mirror and realizing that you need to respect the effects of chronological aging while at the same time, preserving that youthful spirit." And we know what the saying's trying to get to is I want to preserve my youthful spirit. I'm not burdened by the fact that I'm turning 60, but I also, as I recover from a string of minor little sprinting injuries that are making me recalibrate and further my education and my awareness, because obviously something's going wrong if I'm getting little niggles here and there. I have to realize that age is not just a number, while at the same time fighting that battle gracefully to not just sit there and watch the clock go by, as we see in modern society, a disgraceful rate of accelerated aging that's now become the norm.
Mhm. So you've been focused on doing your sprint. You did the golf sprinting. What was it? World
Speed
record
golf.
speed golf. You kind of shifted over the years to get rid of the long distance stuff, endurance, and shift to more focus on short sprints, power. You've been doing a lot of the track work over the last few years. Same thing we hear for female athletes as per Dr. Stacey Sims that seems to be on the circuit right now speaking on podcasts that aging in general, but then the female and male make some adjustments. The females even more important to get rid of so much focus on 80% of zone two, but maybe we should do more sprint. But then I think we still need to personalize it and not but everyone needs to do it this way, but figure out where the person is right now on their journey and the Goldilocks effect, not too much sprinting, because then you're saying, yeah, you're still going to get those little injuries and niggles from overtraining either end, too much sprint hit training or too much volume training. That Goldilocks effect comes into play at everything.
Yeah, I think the main thing that fitness enthusiasts have to address is the uh, extreme exercise patterns that seem to be the norm today that lead to breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury. And in endurance scene, as we know and we've talked about for so long,
I
the
was going to say, we've
classic
said that, hold on, that breakdown, burnout, and
illness and
breakdown.
injury.
Yeah, we've said
Yeah,
that for so many years.
yeah. So when you're talking about like extreme endurance people, um, we're looking at um, overtraining, doing too much volume, too many miles,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, we also have in the gym community, the fitness community, a phenomenon of doing these HIIT workouts, which it seems the vast majority of today's fitness programming is in this model of high intensity interval training. And those are, by definition, exhausting and depleting. So when I say sprint and explosive performance, I'm talking about true sprinting and an area of the fitness piece of the pie that is widely neglected, where you're really going to near all out effort for a very short duration. You're not exhausting yourself with repeated intervals of 30 seconds or a minute or whatever it is. In the name of getting fit or getting a killer workout or crushing the session at the gym and all this terminology that we use when you think about it, like really you want to use the word crush when it comes to your fitness endeavors. That's not really a graceful way to not only will it not optimize your fitness, but it will accelerate aging rather than help you age gracefully. So
Mm-hmm.
backing off from things that are too extreme and too fatiguing and exhausting. And if we want to have some simple takeaways right now, one thing is that your fitness regimen and your workouts should contribute to making you feel more alert, energized, and happier and positive throughout the day, rather than having this payback of getting exhausted in the afternoon and reaching for quick energy snacks and all those patterns that extreme athletes are familiar with.
Well, I keep saying all the time on the show too about the hit, as you just said, hit training, sprint interval training. Most people don't do it right, right? And especially I do that Panoe metabolism test, so you can identify, oh, you're not even working on recovery. You're not going hard. You're going kind of middle of the road, zone 3. You're not doing zone 5 to zone 1 or zone 4 to zone 1. You're just in the middle of the road. And people aren't doing zone 2, they're higher. So it's kind of what Stacy Sims talks. Again, I don't agree with everything she says, but I think then I agree with most people aren't going easy enough to make it easy, and they're not going hard enough to make it hard to get the benefit. So it's like getting that one end to the other. Most people are just kind of here, and their
Hmm.
interval training and classes are like top of zone 3, bottom of zone 3. They don't go all out. And I think that's what you've really showed on all your videos, that sprint training on a track, you're going, a 400 or 200, and then we talk about recovery is twice as long, right? So don't you do one sprint and your recovery as long as you need to, how fast, I think it depends how fast your heart rate drops, because the more you do this, the faster your heart rate recovers down. So what is the right way to do intervals? Then we got to get into why we should be born to walk over running.
Yeah, I think the average fitness enthusiast looking for longevity benefits, overall health, disease prevention, would envision a ancestral aligned training program, which features extensive everyday general low-level movement as the number one priority. Experts are now asserting that it's more important to just move more in general everyday life than it
Mm-hmm.
is to adhere to a devoted fitness regimen. Now, that's kind of trippy to think that your neighbor who's up at 6 a.m. and heading off to spin class, and then riding the subway and working in a building and watching Netflix at night, that person is ranked lower than the person who gardens
Mm-hmm.
throughout the day and walks their
Yeah.
dog 3 times a day and doesn't even show their face in a gym. Of course, there's tremendous benefits to get from getting stronger and maintaining muscle mass, and all the experts are talking about that now, and getting your cardiovascular to appropriate level. But the first objective is just to move more.
Move.
And that
Yeah, I
includes,
agree.
cardio at the proper heart rate, which is at or below fat max heart rate. As you have talked about so much,
a
where
zillion
there's a
times.
huge difference in the metabolic effects of the workout when you push into the medium or difficult zone versus containing it at what could be called easy or moderate. And so we want more of that moderate, non-fatiguing movement throughout the day. A little bit adds up indeed. So we need to also deprogram from this idea that we need to get 45 minutes. If we're going to go to the gym, we got to stay on the Stairmaster for that long or it doesn't count. A
Yeah.
2 or 3 minute break from sitting at your work desk for an hour or two straight is tremendously beneficial if you add it up and you do that a few times a day, every day for a year. We're talking about a huge improvement in lifestyle. And then the
Mhm.
other slices of the pie that represent broad-based functional fitness for longevity are maintaining that muscular strength through resistance training. And then finally, the brief, explosive, all-out efforts. We call them sprints, but it's not just sprinting on the ground. It could
Mhm.
be a sprint on an exercise bike or a rowing machine or things that are low impact, no impact, swimming, something that puts you to near maximum effort where the muscles are not able to continue, get you breathing really hard and feeling like, okay, this is a true strong effort with excellent technique and not getting continuing to where your technique falters and you feel that strain and that struggle because someone's asking you to go, quote, hard for a minute or 2 minutes at a time with 1 minute rest and another 2 minutes. That's all into the category of high intensity interval training. And that's distinctly different from sprinting. And sprinting has by far the best return on investment of any type of exercise for your fitness and for your anti-aging and for your disease prevention. And it's very, very short duration efforts. So as I finish
Hmm.
rambling, I'm going to give a quick takeaway for the actual template sprint workout that'll work for most people. And I would say this is 4 to 8 reps of near all out efforts lasting between 10 and 20 seconds
Mhm.
with at least a 6 to 1 recovery to work ratio. So if you're a person that goes and jogs laps around the stadium or whatever, you can now envision like going up to the stairs and ascending a flight of stairs for 10 or 15 seconds and then resting for a minute to a minute and a half. That's a 6 to 1, 10-second effort, 1 minute rest. If you're going for a 20-second effort, say like on a bike, you're going to rest for 2 minutes. And you only need to do 4 to 8 of those to
Mhm.
have a fantastic sprint session. And you only need to do that around once a week to get these maximum fitness benefits. So it's not like you're
Every
going
day.
out there every day and sprinting up the stairs as fast as you can for 10 seconds. It's a
Mhm.
special session that comes into the mix on a regular basis, but not very frequently. And the whole thing doesn't last very long. Now, of course, the workout itself, you're going to do preparatory
Warm up.
drills, you're going to do your warm up, and you're going to cool down. And so it might, be a 30 or 45-minute session all in, but the actual sprint efforts, 4 to 8, lasting 10 to 20 seconds. It's a minute or two accumulated total. And the research is very clear that these types of sessions have a vastly better impact on fitness than steady state cardio lasting 5, 10, or 20 times as long.
Hmm. Well, I think, we were talking about what I've said for years, the holistic method, that it's exercise is one component and then there's movement. So as you said
Mhm.
earlier ago, it is not going to the gym, lifting your weights and sitting on your bed all day long, but it's movement snacks throughout the day, getting your strength training in and getting the interval training at the appropriate time. Because I think when you talk, everyone talks about sprint interval training, the importance of it, and we can talk more about why, but it's have to be rested. I have to have quality sleep. My legs have to be good to go. I mean, I'm not going to get my heart rate up to 170 up a hill if I'm fatigued. And so I think it's like, it goes back to, are you doing your interval training correctly? Because there's no way I could do it multiple days and I have to be, I mean, everything has to line right, right? My sleep, my nutrition, my recovery, my niggles. You got to be on, ready to go to hit whatever your top heart rate is to get into your zone 5.
Oh, for sure. And when you're envisioning these workouts or commencing them with a warm-up period and some preparatory drills, some technique drills, you want to notice very carefully how your body's feeling. And if you're not feeling great and chomping at the bit and ready to go, you just pass and envision the workout for another day and do something easier. So, in general, as a takeaway, the anaerobic system responds to high intensity, extensive rest, and low frequency, while the aerobic system responds to the opposite. So those listening who have been in that endurance game and thinking about their weekly mileage and what's your mileage as you prepare for the marathon or the Ironman, how many hours, the aerobic system responds to high volume, low intensity, and high frequency. So now we're faced with a challenge. And this is my personal challenge that I hinted at, where I transitioned from a lifelong endurance athlete to now I'm calling myself a sprinter and a high jumper, is I have to reject and say goodbye to that background endurance mentality where I wake up every day and say, what kind of work can I do to contribute to improving my fitness? And the endurance athlete is thinking, how many hours can I put in? Well, I did 5 hours yesterday, so today's an easy day. I only do 1.5 to 2 hours. And it's all about the volume. And we always use the term consistency. I'm trying to improve my swim. I need to be more consistent and get to the pool 4 days a week instead of three, and all this kind of thinking, which if done properly, sure, that's how you're going to excel at the Ironman like you did and keep going back to Kona 6 times in a row or whatever the wonderful achievements that you had that took a lot of hard work. But when you're looking for longevity and you're looking for broad-based functional fitness, we have to understand that the endurance is just a narrow little slice of the big pie. And we also have to respect the importance of building and maintaining strength and also maintaining those anaerobic fast twitch muscle fibers, which, by the way,
Mm.
those are lost at a vastly greater rate as we age versus the aerobic slow twitch muscle fibers. So we can maintain our endurance and go climb to the top of Mount Rainier every year on our birthday until we're 77 or whatever. And it's amazing what the elderly endurance athlete can continue to do day after year after year. But when it comes to sprinting, it's use it or lose it. And for most people, even people that you meet in the gym that are 24 years old or 37 or 42, if they're just stomping up the Stairmaster, they are losing their balance, they're losing their explosiveness, they're
Mhm.
losing their upper end potential, even for endurance training, because you do have to train those fast twitch muscle fibers occasionally, and you're losing out on all the main benefits of being a well-rounded athlete. Of most interest to most people is body composition, fat reduction. And that comes much more effectively and reliably from high intensity exercise than it does from grinding out the miles. And that might be a transition to some of the central philosophical elements of our book, that running is not really what it's cracked up to be. And the running boom is built on hype and fabrication.
Well, just to touch on that, I think it's a lot of people think when especially doing metabolism testing, and hearing everything that's going on in our industry about females versus male, what do when they are aging, what does your workout look like? What happens as we age, people say you're going to gain weight and you lose strength, you lose power, you lose speed. But I've done all these Google searches, Chat GPT, going, okay, what happens as we age? And then you look at the whole list, it's all controllable. It's a bunch of
Mm.
crap, right? It's like, all right, I get slower. This happened, I get fatter. It's all because we lose lean body mass. And it's like, wait, you can control that. We can do speed work, we can do power, we can do strength training, and we can prioritize our protein in our diet. And so I always laugh at that. What happens as we age is not what it's meant to be. It's not like, oh, that's my new normal. We can control, and as we said before, change how I show up to life, change how I train, and not do the same training program I did training for Ironman and try to keep that up when I'm more about training for my 80-year-old future self.
Yeah,
So,
that stuff's a young person's game, and when you're in your younger years, you can get away with a lot. You can play in the NFL and tackle people, and then you'll be walking around with a cane when you're 50, and that's kind of a graphic example. But just hold on to your seats for a moment, people, because this is exactly what's happening in the endurance scene, where now peers of my age that I raced on the professional triathlon circuit with back in the 80s and 90s are coming up left and right with heart problems that are attributed to chronic over stress of the heart muscle itself and the scarring and inflammation that ensues. And the atrial fibrillation is the condition when the electrical signaling gets compromised in the right ventricle of your heart because of all that scarring and inflammation, because you have done years and years of high mileage and racing and extreme efforts that at the time, maybe you were busting into your best times, but you paid the price later. So
Mhm.
it's especially important for longevity to have a sensible approach to fitness. And I also should mention like the amazing new phenomenon of these hybrid athletes, which I'm sure you're familiar with on the internet, where you see the guy deadlifting the 500-pound barbell and then taking off and running the mile in under 5 minutes. Only one person has ever done that in the world. And, these other guys that are doing, powerlifting 1,000 pounds for the three main lifts is like a big benchmark in the gym. So they bench press, squat, and deadlift accumulated total of 1,000 pounds, and then they take off and run a marathon. It's like it is so impressive. And their physiques, this is kind of like the CrossFit scene too, where they have all these different competencies where they can endure, a series of rope climbs, and then they do box jumps, and then they do handstand push-ups, and then they do Olympic lifts. And it's so impressive to have all those fitness capabilities. But again, I'm looking at it as like a young person's game, because if you want to devote yourself to getting that strong, to be able to deadlift 500 pounds, and if you get in your car and we drive around to the nearest 20 gyms closest to your house in San Diego there and look for somebody that can deadlift 500, you're talking about a huge, massive human that looks like they could play on the line in the NFL. And then we got to go looking for someone who can break 5 minutes in the mile. And you're talking about a little greyhound who's running on the college team who's, 5'10", 130. Someone who can do both. That's an extraordinary athletic accomplishment, but the training necessary is incredibly arduous. So if you want to kind of take that example and honor the example of the hybrid athlete at what small scale you aspire to at the age of 43 or 53 or 63, that's great. But all the different training stimulus do have an energy cost where you can't have it all. And this particularly relates to people that have that endurance fascination and love getting out there and putting in their miles and their hours. And now they're told that they should go sprint, and they're told that they should lift weights a couple times a week. And it's too much because they insist on an extreme approach to endurance where the heart rate is climbing too high every time they go out there, or they're pegging it right at their MAF heart rate or their fat max heart rate. And it's not necessary to allocate that much energy just to steady state cardiovascular fitness, because the return is not there. And the risks start to increase, as you know, from getting hormonal and metabolic problems due to, a
Oh.
faithful devotion to weekly mileage and weekly hours.
Hmm. So the new book is called Born to Run. I mean, not Born to Run, Born to Walk. And what made you guys shift into discussing this topic from previous books or nutrition, keto, carnivore, fasting? Now, what was the inspiration to talk about running or not running, and that we walk more, longevity, weight loss, health goals? What was the motivation?
Well, one of them was the tremendous sensational bestseller from 2009 called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. He did a great job highlighting the amazing primitive living Tarahumara natives in Copper
Hmm.
Canyon of Mexico, and featuring some of the top ultra runners who went down there to participate in the race, and presenting this argument that is highly validated in evolutionary biology that humans are the most exceptional extreme athletes on the earth. And if you put a race long enough, for example, let's say 50 miles, there's a YouTube video where it has everybody on the starting line is like the cheetah, the lion, the antelope, the human, and the horse. And they go along, and the cheetah wins up to 200 meters by far, and the human's in last place all the way up to 2 miles or 5 miles or whatever. But the human has all these amazing endurance attributes. And our history and our past and our evolution entailed, as we know, opportunistic scavenging and persistence hunting. That's how we evolved to the top of the food chain. So we were able to strategically and smartly go after the great beasts of the earth and take down that woolly mammoth and enjoy 3 million calories for the clan for months, and also get that access to dense nutrition that gave us the development of the biggest brain so that we could rise to the top of the food chain. So we have these endurance genetics. And you can go look at exercise physiology or evolutionary biology books and papers talking about how, hey, guess what? Humans stand upright, which is much more efficient for running than it is to crawl around on all fours. We have sweat glands so we can last for hours in the heat. That's what gives us our main advantage over other animals. We have the amazing complex in the foot, where we're talking about a quarter of all the bones and joints in the body, 33 different joints and ligaments and muscles, nearly 100 muscles, all these amazing attributes that allow our feet to gracefully absorb impact, where we can take off and run down the road like an amazing creature. However, the distortion of evolutionary biology today is to sit back and close the book with a smile and conclude, wow, humans are born to run, so I'm going to get my butt in gear and get myself a pair of elevated cushion shoes and take off down the pavement and start running 3 miles or 5 miles or 10 miles and then work up to marathon. So we're talking about an extremely inactive and unfit population picking up this incredibly difficult activity of endurance running, and doing so to the extent of, I saw you working your pen earlier in the show, breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury is the norm in the endurance training scene.
Mhm.
Not the exception, like you got bad luck, but the research, and we cite a whole bunch of different research in the book of the rate of running injuries. It's absolutely pathetic and embarrassing. Yale University School of Medicine contends that 50% of all regular runners are injured every year. Wake Forest says 82%. Other research says 38%. And so we're bantering about that it's like half of all runners are injured
Mm.
with an overuse injury every year. And
Yeah.
25% of all regular runners are injured at any given time. So something is wrong with that picture when no one is tackling you when you're running down the trails or down the roads. You know, the NFL injury rate per year is 31%. So it's
Wow.
lower than running injuries.
Mm.
Of course, their injuries are different, but the point is made that if this community is continuing to sustain overuse injuries, we have a major, major problem. And as
Mhm.
we detail in the book, the big problem and the thing that facilitated the running boom dating back 50 years into the 70s was the invention by Nike of the elevated cushion shoe. Because before they came out with the waffle trainer in the mid 70s and all the ensuing models, those who wanted to engage in endurance running had to use super crappy shoes that were zero drop with very minimal cushion, and they weren't that fun to plod along in unless you were super highly adapted. So what we saw in the early days of running were skinny freaks that were very athletically talented and gifted and had good broad-based functional fitness so that they could go out and train for the college and the high school team, and then perhaps continue beyond that and try to go for the gold in the Olympics like Frank Shorter did in 1972. And when you see a guy with USA on his shirt winning the Olympic gold, it helps to kick off what was called the running boom that still continues today, 50 years later. But it's interesting to note how the running boom has been built upon hype, marketing hype, misinformation, and flawed logic. And the flawed logic I'm referring to is like, hey, Homo sapiens has the genetics for endurance, so we should go out and do steady state cardio day after day to accumulate all these weekly mileage because those guys in the Copper Canyon in Mexico are doing it and they're awesome. And so was Phidippides, the great Greek soldier that inspired the modern day marathon distance, and all this glory and fascination that get us to get off the couch and go out there and run. Watching Frank Shorter win the gold, watching Jim Fixx write that string of bestsellers in the 70s, The Complete Book of Running, Kenneth Cooper wrote the book Aerobics in 1968, and people started to awaken to this idea that it could be really healthy to go out there and exercise. So, of course, it was beneficial to get anything that gets someone off their butt and into movement is great. So if you're a devoted endurance athlete listening, I don't want to turn you off to the point where you're going to leave the show early, but I do have to set the stage here for the idea that for the vast majority of endurance runners, it's not healthy. It does not help you lose weight, and it most likely will result in overuse injury and fatigue, burnout, and all the rest, and a lack of other aspects of fitness, like we've talked about sprinting and strength training, because you don't have the
Balance.
energy.
Hmm. So a couple big topics. I see chapter 4, a whole thing of chronic cardio is something to talk about. And the building a base, we've talked about for years about the maffetone, max aerobic function heart rate. I know you've done metabolism testing, your peak fat burning metabolic efficiency point, your fat max, all of that information. So what are you suggesting is wrong with the cardio, doing chronic cardio? As you just said, is you don't have enough time or energy to do what we really need to do, the strength training, and add in sprint training and have to cut back on the cardio. Maybe it's once a week. So what is a problem with cardio when you're doing it too much? That's chronic cardio.
I think the main problem out there for the masses is that the activity is too strenuous, and therefore it's not triggering the desired fitness benefits, namely getting good at burning fat so that you can have the physique that you dream of. So if you look at this from exercise physiology standpoint and like the testing that you're doing, we can now identify the what's going on in the body when you're burning energy. And so there's a critical distinction when it comes to endurance training, and it's called fat max heart rate or maffetone, maximum aerobic function heart rate. And this can be identified in the laboratory, but it can also be estimated, where the maffetone formula, widely respected, is take 180 minus your age, calculate that number in beats per minute, and that is your estimated fat max heart rate. I just told you I'm almost 60, so 180 minus 60, my fat max would be 120. Someone who's 40 would have a fat max of 140. And so in beats per minute, what that represents, most likely very close, is the rate, the maximum rate of fat oxidation per minute in the body while you're exercising. You're burning the maximum number of fat calories per minute at that heart rate. Now, if you were to speed up your pace, obviously, of course, you're going to be burning more total calories the faster you go, right? When you sprint, you burn more calories when you're jogging. Imagine that. So if you exceed that fat max pace, what happens is your rate of fat burning starts to go down and your rate of glucose burning starts to spike. So if you can close your eyes and envision a graph, like an upside down U, where the fat max, you burn more fat calories per minute as you get up from a chair and start walking and start brisk walking and start jogging, and you're going, and then you hit this fat max heart rate. Now, it starts to dive down as you go faster because your body does not have enough oxygen and cannot supply ATP fast enough to rely on fat burning as the pace gets quicker. As the pace gets quicker, you need to rely on quicker burning glucose. And so that's the simple exercise physiology look here at the proper way to train for endurance exercise. Because for endurance, of course, we want to be able to last all day long out there on the lava fields, pedaling our bike, and then going for a marathon run after, or whatever your endurance goal is, climbing up to the highest peak in your county every summer and so forth. So you want to get good at burning fat so that you don't crap out after an hour and a half, like an unfit person might if they were going along on the hike with you. So it's extremely important to conduct the vast majority of your steady state cardiovascular exercise at or below or well below that fat max heart rate. So you're playing in the fat burning zones. You feel refreshed and energized after the workout rather than slightly cooked and looking for the nearest freezer so you can hit a pint of Ben and Jerry's. Those are signs that you depleted yourself with a workout that was slightly too significantly too stressful and is stimulating the wrong energy systems such that you can become what we might call a sugar burner. So someone who can go perhaps at an impressive pace for an hour long bike ride or whatever they're doing, but they're relying on sugar burning. And so that's when they plunge into the patterns of recurring fatigue, delayed recovery, perhaps an increased appetite, especially for sugary treats, because you repeatedly deplete your glycogen stores during the workout rather than rely mostly on fat stores and all that kind of stuff that hopefully your readers are familiar with if I'm speaking too quickly about it.
I've talked about this a zillion episodes. I've been doing a lot of rabbit hole podcasts as your inspiration of on your show. You've done many yourself, but so I started doing these rabbit hole Thursday episodes and some Sundays because it's funny because you're saying all the stuff we've talked about 12 years ago. And I interviewed Bob Seebehor and I took his training on this same subject 2009. When did we start? I started working with Matt Fatone and Mark Allen in 2001. So it's funny. I always laugh that, okay, we're going back deep into this again. Obviously, we didn't get the message across early on because I feel like I'm having to, like, let's go back and hear the podcast that we did 12 years ago because this is all we talked about. And I quit kind of going into it. But now, especially that I bought a metabolism testing kit and I'm seeing what's happening from the way people are training. And I know people are struggling as they age, doing what their current programs are not working, they're not thriving, and they're gaining weight. And
Hmm.
you can, test and not guess what's going on under the hood, but really looking at what people are doing to lose weight, to improve performance. And then the third category is longevity, health optimizers, your future self. So what you're saying, if you're looking at fat loss, we're suggesting revisit what your current program is, maybe do more walking, or if you're doing a Maffetone workout or fat max that say it's 120 for you, that might be walking, but what if it could be slow jogging? Or are you suggesting no run at all? We should just be walking. But I want to be around
Well,
120. So what's your
yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's not whatever some dude says on a podcast. You're going to do what you like to do. And so I want to put the ball in your court and say to the listener, look, hopefully you're measuring your heart rate. It's extremely important to do so to get the intended metabolic and fitness stimulation of the workout.
Mhm.
And you have to decide, I mean, realize what is your pace at that fat max heart rate. And excuse me, it's also for the entire workout. So people will go out and do a fat max test and they'll go to the track and they'll run a mile and they'll say, my fat max pace is 9:43. But if you're going for a 5 mile outing or whatever, an hour long outing or 2 hour long outing, like a hike or what have you, you need to respect that for the entire session, which means that your pace per mile, the thing that we're so obsessed with and use our GPS to now determine how fast we're running at all times, it has to be under fat max for the duration of the workout. And yes, even little glitches where, oh, the hill was too steep and I didn't have good enough gearing, so I exceeded fat max, but it was only for a few minutes. Exercise physiology research confirms that when you start dumping lactic byproducts into the bloodstream, it's very difficult to clear unless you're an elite athlete. They do really good job at clearing, but the average recreational person, if they speed up for a certain portion of the workout, getting up that steep hill or getting a little too frisky with their jogging partners down the bike trail from mile 2 to mile 3, they are ruining the intended metabolic effects of the workout because they've stimulated those other pathways, and it's difficult to get back to optimal fat burning. So you have to be
Mhm.
greatly disciplined to keep that heart rate in the proper zone when you are doing a proper endurance training session. And that's funny you said like we still haven't got the message. Why don't we go back years and listen? And I'm thinking of myself, the young professional triathlete, halfway through my career, approaching Mark Allen and literally cornering him into a fence in the transition area after a race one time. And I said, Mark, what's going on? I'm a young guy. I'm talented. I work hard. I'll do whatever it takes to win. And you're still kicking my ass. And I'm exhausted and I can't give one more ounce to training. What's going on here? And he said, look, you have to be good to your body. You have to slow down and build that aerobic system. And I learned myself, Mark said, in his early years as a triathlete, he kept getting injured and falling apart, even though he was clearly the most talented athlete that the sport had seen. But he wasn't on all the starting lines because he was learning the sport, and he got his nickname, the grip of death, by pushing really, really hard in training sessions. And he said, I had to learn to monitor my heart rate, honor what Maffetone was talking about. And so Maffetone started getting to these top athletes like Mike Pigg as well, and they start winning all the races. Guess who pays a lot of attention? Those guys in the pack that are getting their butt kicked. So about halfway through my career, I got that watch and I paid great discipline and I slowed down all my workouts. And what happened was my fitness and my performances progressed without those interruptions from breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury because I was finally protecting my overall physiology, my hormone balance, my immune function, all the things that would kick into the mix and mess me up because I'd get a cold for 2 weeks when I thought I was training great and kicking butt and beating everybody on the difficult climb, and then I'd be in bed. And so clearly, as Mark Sisson says, quote, if you have an injury, that's your body's way of telling you that you're doing it wrong. And so these overuse injuries, clearly, the vast majority of endurance athletes are doing it wrong because the results speak for themselves. You also mentioned the failure to reduce excess body fat. And it's like, wait a second, you're out there training for 12 or 15 or 9 or 20 hours per week, and you're still complaining that you have a little pooch, or worse yet, a firm spare tire indicating the presence of visceral fat. That means there's an extreme problem with your approach, and you definitely have more potential to do it correctly and get your hormones, your physiology, and as well as your competitive performance right.
Mhm. Yeah, so true. I mean, we've been saying this for years, as we just shared, but the one thing you said that I find a lot when I do fitness testing and train people ongoing and look at their data, that's the one problem I think a lot of people are doing is that they get the test and they see their fat max. And I stress the importance not to go by your workouts by pace, as you just said, Brad, that you need to look at heart rate, not ride your bike or do. I had someone doing this, I couldn't get them to switch, but don't do a track workout based on pace. You should
Right.
go by
It's
heart rate. It's like you could have gone faster, perhaps too, and not hold back. But I think people look at pace, biking, running, swimming, not
yeah,
by heart rate.
it's hilarious. I mean, the Olympic athletes, Jakob Ingebrigtsen, you can watch him on YouTube, the greatest middle distance runner in the world. He's doing 25 times 400 meters in 102 at anaerobic threshold. So he needs to focus on pace because he's trying to win the Olympic gold and break the world record. But for most of us, at almost all workouts, what we're really looking at is a declining pace as the workout goes along because you're protecting your heart rate and your physiology, not your pace. The one day that you might want to focus on pace is the race day, where you want to keep a consistent output of watts on the bike, or in a marathon. Obviously, the fastest way to run is to run even splits throughout the race. But that's not something that we need to practice in training because it just it leads to overdoing it and the wrong metabolic effects. So that's a huge takeaway that if we emphasize fat burning heart rates, we're going to avoid all being a stat about injury and burnout, and the attrition rates are pretty huge from these group training programs that push people too hard too soon to do an extreme endurance accomplishment. And so you can go over to their house and see their medal hanging on the wall and then ask, oh, so do you still exercise in any way? Or was that just a bucket list thing? And
One
that
and
kind of
done.
is unfortunate because I think the greatest benefits are to be had when fitness becomes a lifestyle rather than a bucket list accomplishment and then go back on the couch. But that regression and that disappointment that people express is coming from a flawed approach. So really what the book's about is getting you to turn the corner and realize that a kinder, gentler, and more sensible approach is the path to success and long-term, compliance with something that you actually enjoy rather than you're just suffering through.
It's that finding that right balance for you. And this is why I love working with clients, create a personalized program and not guess what they should do just based on social media. It is how much time should, per your week, when we write out your workouts, where do you need to spend the most time in? And you're saying the long sustained distance, zone one, zone two, or you're doing the zone five and to zone one intervals, and then the strength training that you're figuring out what does that person need to do so they can thrive as they age. And that percentage of how much you allot each day, what your workout schedule looks like, is going to vary per person based on where
Yeah.
they are in their journey, but their past program as well as
Yeah.
current program.
And here's the thing, you mentioned social media. There's so much information and opinion out
Overload.
there that it gets exhausting and slightly stressful, especially for someone who's not deeply immersed and can have a comeback in their brain for everything that they get hit with. So you and I are deeply immersed and we can talk opinions about all the stuff out there for hours. But one thing I want to point out is, look, the most important workouts for you to do are the ones that you
You're
enjoy
going
the
to do.
most
Yeah.
and that you're going to do. Anything will bring tremendous results in comparison to total rest, just like any change, any positive change in body composition by any means necessary will result in a health benefit. Can you sustain a fasting 48-hour every other day diet? Probably not. But it's like you got to get things handled and come out of the gate swinging and saying, I am going to turn into a fit, athletic person. So if you're attracted to pickleball because it's now the hot sport of the planet, that's wonderful. I would recommend a broad-based approach so you don't go and get injured and get surgery because it's also the number one
Common.
injury sport of all
Yes.
time because people can put a racket in their hand and go out there and reach for one shot and they haven't done any exercise or any fitness. They're in big trouble. So
Yeah.
it's things that you enjoy and that are natural and sustainable. So when it comes to endurance exercise and those early chapters of our book talking about how we've
Mm-hmm.
been lured and culturally programmed to think that the marathon is the ultimate accomplishment or the Ironman is the ultimate accomplishment for a triathlete. And it's utter nonsense because maybe the ultimate accomplishment for you is to be able to run that 5K turkey trot not this
Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving, but next Thanksgiving, you're going to run 3 miles and have this
Mm-hmm.
beautiful long buildup that's not overly stressful or overly influenced by messaging from outside what feels natural and sustainable to you. So, as I said earlier, if you just get up and move more frequently in everyday life in any form, walking, of course, is the centerpiece to increase movement, but yoga moves and Tai Chi sessions and rushing up staircases rather than walking. That's kind of one of my built-in habits into my life is whenever I encounter a staircase, I do fast feet. I do like
Right.
a little sprint drill up the staircase. And it's just something I do. It's not like a workout. I'm not counting
Mm-hmm.
anything, but you want to sprinkle in these little opportunities to be a more fit, active person. And then when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to formal, traditional workout and fitness programming, again, I'm calling out the fitness industry for spewing programming that is inherently too stressful for
Mm-hmm.
most people. So, someone asked me, Hey, Brad, what do you think of CrossFit? I think it's great, and the community's great, and the emphasis on all these other different competencies is great. But if every workout were cut in half, I believe it would be a much greater positive contribution to mankind because the stress level for most average everyday people in there is simply too much. And that includes me. I'm a pretty fit guy. I've been to several CrossFit classes where I look at my watch halfway through and be like, I'm good. You already asked me to do 15 pull-ups and then come back and do 8 on the next, and then 5, and then do a couple more box jumps. And I'm giving it my all. I'm doing something explosive and powerful with crisp technique. And now I'm getting freaking tired and my back's getting a little stiff and my knees feeling it. So, for most people out there, if you've been socialized or encouraged to push yourself hard, realize that this is not the true path to fitness and longevity. And up in the clouds, your 80-year-old self is shaking his or her head, going, Dude, what are you doing? You don't have to push that hard. I think
Mm-hmm.
this is a good chance to mention the great Eliud Kipchoge, the greatest marathon runner of all time, one of the greatest endurance machines that the planet has ever seen. He published his training logs on the internet for all of us to examine, and the exercise physiologists and the coaches had a field day breaking down and filming him on YouTube. You can see all kinds of content about this guy. He runs 83% of his weekly mileage at what he calls easy or 50% capacity and what the physiologists call zone one, not zone two, zone one. And zone
Mm-hmm.
two is like 9%. And
Mm-hmm.
zone three, four, five, the tough stuff is only like 7%. Hopefully that's
Yeah.
near 100 there. But if the greatest runner of all time, the most talented freak athlete that we've ever seen, is spending most of his time in zone one, what does that share for the average enthusiast who aspires also to finish the same freaking race as him, a marathon or even a half
Yeah.
marathon?
Mm-hmm.
You will get vastly more fitness benefits with less risk of breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury by doing most of your training in zone one. Don't get me
Mm-hmm.
wrong. I love the recent promotion of zone two as this magical fitness experience. And you hear the leading influences of our time touting their zone two workout. And I do this many zone two workouts and I do this many VO2 max workouts.
Uh-huh.
And I check off this box and I check off this box. And oh, by the way, it's all been validated by science. I'm here to say I would rather look at the behavior patterns of the elite athletes than just tout science as the ultimate way to design a workout program because there are many flaws with that thinking and we have to
Mm-hmm.
do what works best for us. And in fact, the elite athletes are showing that zone one should have more emphasis than zone two. But if I do a Google search for zone one, I only have 7 results. And then I do zone two, I have 787,000 different articles and videos. Now there's
Mm-hmm.
8 results because it'll say Debbie Potts podcast with Brad Kearns, the importance of zone one training.
I know. You done?
Well, here's the thing. It's not as fun. It's not as exhilarating because
Yeah.
when we go out there and we burn out all that pent up energy that we have from dealing with a crappy boss or a dysfunctional relationship or the stress of raising kids or driving in traffic, we want to bust loose and push ourselves hard and feel
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of that strain and struggle to
Let's sprint.
counterbalance the rest of easy life. That's right. You can do it in a correct manner where you're harnessing your energy and you're strategically deciding how to push and challenge your body to break through to a higher fitness level
Yeah.
rather than make it this classic endurance sufferfest that so many triathletes are guilty of with their behavior
Mm-hmm.
patterns.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. And I think it is a good self-experiment. I know someone in my household, there's two of us, so not me, but the other person, they hurt their plantar probably from, you know, they're heard the benefits of running stairs and then doing stair hops and then tried doing single leg hops a little too much and hurt themselves months ago. And so we started hiking more and
Hmm.
we're support my workout partner. I'm like, my body feels better doing these hikes. And we went to Park City for a week. I was like, you know what? I feel like I've lost weight or just walking, doing these. I mean, granted, we did 3, 4 hour hikes and I don't need to eat much. So you're burning ton of fat. And then we have this trail right here that I call the minimal effective dose workout. It's just 1 mile to the top. It's 1,000 feet elevation gained
Wow.
over 1 mile. It's just right out my window. And we've been doing that twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. And I'll run down. But it's just, I tell people I've been trying to do a lot of videos, like, I'm walking up here hiking. My heart rate's 120. I
Right.
can walk fast and get 140 on the steep pitches. And I don't need to go running because running is just hard on my body. And I always have these tight hips and I can't, my external rotation is horrible. And I just feel like the more I run, the more stiff and crippled looking I'm walking, struggling. That's like, well, why am I doing this to myself? But I want that heart, that feeling of getting a good workout, good sweat. So doing the sprints, yes. But I find hiking, or if you find hills, if we go to Torrey Pines, I can get that same endorphin rush that you can do running and actually feels better in my body. And I really found that out for myself this past few months hiking. And I know you've been doing that, those long hikes too. And Tom's Joshua Tree did some crazy thing that, it just feels better. And you might not feel like, oh, I'm getting older. That's wimpy of me. I'm not getting any benefits from it. And I should be running, but I'll just add in that the people that are running, they struggle. The clients I test really struggle to keep their heart rate in that zone 1, 2. If they run, their heart rate jumps up. So as we go back to born to walk and the benefits of that Fat Max workout, don't feel bad that you have to actually walk or do a hike to be at your Fat Max. Because I think people feel poorly about themselves as an athlete that, okay, I can't run and keep my heart rate down. So I'm not just going to skip that whole zone 2 Fat Max stuff. That doesn't work for me because I can't keep my heart rate down. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's brainwashing to think, oh, I'm not getting a good enough workout because I'm not suffering or I'm not moving at the gait pattern of running. I'm moving at the gait pattern of walking. And you just mentioned like you get all the aerobic conditioning benefits with no impact trauma because the maximum impact load of walking is 1x body weight, right? There's 1 foot on the
Mm-hmm.
ground all the time. That's the definition of the walking gait is that 1 foot's always on the ground, where the running gait has what's called a flight phase where both feet are in the air and then you land. And the impact trauma with running is 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 times body weight. Usain Bolt will impart 5 times body weight into the ground when he's sprinting, breaking the world record. So he weighs 200 pounds. He's importing 1,000 pounds of vertical force into the ground with each stride. But the average jogger is imparting around 3 times body weight impact on each stride. And so an easy 5 mile run for a 150-pound person generates 2.3 million pounds of impact force into the body versus, again, walking is just 1 times body weight. So you can't really count it as impact force. And so the distinction there is the clear reason why half of runners are injured every year. But the contributing factor or the driving factor are the shoes. Because when you wear elevated cushion shoes, it destroys your proprioception and it enables a poor technique that
Mm-hmm.
results in excess impact trauma dispersed throughout the lower extremities. So, what happens when a poorly adapted person puts on elevated cushion shoes to head out for a run is they can achieve this very common overstriding, jarring, breaking type of stride pattern. And why do joggers exhibit poor stride mechanics? Is because they're not fit enough to actually run where they have a balanced center of gravity and land at the midfoot and pronate and explode off the harnessing of the kinetic energy from the Achilles tendon and the arch. Just because they haven't run in a while and they just can't do it, but they're able to shuffle along at whatever pace you want to count. That's a shuffle pace, and so they are able to access a sport that they otherwise wouldn't be able to, and they shouldn't be doing it. But it's just the shoes that have enabled it, and that's kind of a sobering reality of what we're seeing when we're looking at the masses plugging along and crossing the finish line in the marathon.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked about that. This shoes are important. So I know we're out of time and there's so much information in this book that we want to, I'm just looking at my notes. So just ton of good information on the history of shoes and the importance of running less and walking more and doing sprint interval training and the type of shoes to wear. I've been trying. I don't wear shoes that much here. I wear bare feet. But if I'm going out wearing shoes, talk about the shoes that you guys have out there.
Oh, thanks.
Paluvas.
So, Mark Sisson's latest venture is Paluva Minimalist Footwear. He started the company with his son Kyle. We've only been around for about a year and a half selling the shoes, but it's been an amazing journey of a lot of R&D and trying to bring to market the ultimate barefoot inspired shoe. So we know that minimalist footwear is a big popular category now, and you're getting the zero drop or the minimal drop from heel to toe. But this is a true barefoot shoe which has 5 individual slots for each of your toes. So you put it on and you're able to simulate a barefoot type of stride and posture and balance. And what we're arguing for and urging people is to gracefully trend in the direction of a more barefoot inspired lifestyle. So at any safe time, such as you mentioned in the house, or if you're down on the beach, take off your shoes and go barefoot and reawaken the lost functionality of your feet and the tremendous atrophy that's been caused by a lifetime of wearing elevated constrictive shoes. And
Mhm.
we're not saying to go and run in these shoes because that will get you injured. And that happened about 20 years ago when the first barefoot shoes came out and they were really popular. And the book Born to Run kind of also helped drive the minimalist shoe movement.
Sandals.
But what a lot of runners were finding out is their poor Achilles tendons, which have been elevated and compressed their entire life every
Mm.
time they're wearing shoes, couldn't take the full stride pattern and got lit up and injured. So we don't want an injured population. We want you to walk more in general everyday life, and we want you to do it in a proper footwear experience where it's simulating a barefoot style, where you get the proprioception, your awareness of the ground, and how to balance your moving body weight gracefully rather than clomping along in these essentially they're casts that are just putting your foot into a nice, comfortable slot. It feels good walking down the sidewalk because you feel like you're walking on a cloud. But what's happening is you're disengaging the brain from the sensations that are super important, the tactile sensations of every stride when you are deciding how to negotiate, for example, a bumpy, rocky trail and keep your balance. And when we clomp along in hiking shoes or we're wearing these super elevated, puffy cushion running shoes, we're kind of living our life on a balance beam rather than being connected to the earth and the ground and being well balanced and exhibiting good posture and stride mechanics at all times, whether walking or running.
I've worn ultras for a long time before that, some other minimal shoes and zeros and some other things. And I always think it's funny looking at Ironman Hawaii this year, and Hoka is everywhere and their sponsor. And when Hoka started and Ultra started about the same time, they're kind of have merged to the same level of shoe. Hoka had that when it first came out. It's like I wouldn't wear it because I'm already tall. I didn't want to look like a giant. So I thought it'd be weird walking on this marshmallow foam. But now they've cut theirs in half, and Ultra was really low, and they raised
Hmm.
theirs. So now they kind of met in the middle. So people maybe couldn't adjust to having too flat of shoe or too much of a minimalist effect. I don't know, or cushioning, people just too much transition for them. But
Yeah, I
you have
mean,
to
if
start
you're doing
somewhere.
something crazy like endurance running, these really super cushioned shoes will help you because otherwise you couldn't, like back in the 70s, I mentioned. But we have to recognize that these shoes are bad for your feet and bad for your body, just like wedging your foot into the mountain climbing shoe. If people are familiar, that the shoes are unbelievably brutally tight because you want to safely go up the rock like Alex Honnold. And so they're putting your shoes like into a ballet slipper where same with high heels for the female, or males who like to wear them. I'm not judging, but of course they're horrible for your feet, but they make you feel good and they're part of life and they're part of fashion. It's just the idea now of being kinder to your feet by drifting into a more barefoot inspired shoe choices and lifestyle. And at palooza.com, I have a free ebook that you can download and learn all about how to make this transition gracefully and the benefits of uh, going barefoot or wearing minimalist shoes and the drawbacks of wearing elevated cushioned shoes. It's kind of sobering, but it's something to think about rather than just following the consumer path to buying more and more cushioned shoes or whatever exciting new thing that they're rolling out. But again, not to
Mm,
criticize and say those Hokas are terrible. Hokas have helped a lot of people finish a lot of long distance runs and races that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. We're
mm,
just now saying, look, let's do this right. Let's look at the big picture. If you love endurance training, I don't want to take that away from you, but I will strongly advocate for slowing down. And oh, guess what? If your fat max pace is slower than 14 minutes per mile, which for most people it is for duration, that is the difference for the human, the change from a jogging gait to walking gait. So at
mm,
14 minutes, if you want to go faster than 14 minutes, you start jogging. If you're going slower, you're walking. So a
mhm.
brisk walk might be the go-to modality for endurance training, even for people who are serious and preparing for a marathon or an Ironman. I mean, come on, look out on the lava fields at even at the best Ironman races like Kona, where you have to qualify. Most people are shuffling or walking anyway. So it's like, get out there and walk. It still counts as a training session.
So true. So I'll put all the links in the show notes. I know we've got a discount code for the shoes, and the book is out January 7th, 2025.
Yeah, you can
Right?
pre-order it right now. Special promotional incentives. You can look at borntowalkbook.com and read extensive details about what's in there. And I'm so glad to connect with you and share this message, especially as a longtime endurance athlete. Like I said, if I'd known some of the things I know now, I would have been
Mm-hmm.
a lot better off during the time of my extreme training and being a little more sensible and realizing how the body really responds to training in the best way.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I said in the beginning of the show. The podcast focus is right now is to how we can improve how we age, getting those nutrition programs, the fitness programs, and just health optimization protocols designed for ourselves as unique individuals so we can thrive as we age and start changing things a little bit as we go. I think people get stuck in doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, a little insanity, and not paying attention to, oh, this isn't working anymore. Maybe I should stop, push, pause, and do a little reset, reboot, and figure out a new approach because it doesn't work. And they think, oh, this is my new normal. That they could still like I'm on a mission to get stronger, to get faster, to get more powerful, and that's not going to be done if I did what I used to do, right? So we have to
Mm.
really embrace the aging process. So I
Love it,
appreciate your
Debbie.
journey.
Keep doing your good work. It's so important.
You too. Well, thanks, Brad. And we'll put links in the show notes and people can follow you on your Rad podcast. And where are you mostly sharing your journey on Instagram,
Sure.
Facebook?
Instagram, BRAD Podcast. Just happy to connect with people and see what you think. I'd love to hear from your listeners what they think about the show and the premise and all the different ways around it and to figure out this thing. But for that simple takeaway, I love go find stuff that you enjoy doing that you truly enjoy and makes you feel good. And don't
Yeah.
succumb to the marketing hype that you're supposed to struggle and suffer your way through life and in pursuit of fitness.
Yeah. And comparison is a thief of joy. So do what makes you don't listen to other people, just do what makes you feel good and that you're going to be consistent, get the results you want. So
Love it.
thanks, Brad.